Obviously, when something like this happens in the Middle East, when we see these conflicts, there is always the possibility for fallout here in the New York region. So that's why we wanted to bring in former NYPD Sergeant Greg Sanfilippo, also a member of the Marine Corps. And I've heard that when you serve in the Marine Corps, you're never not a Marine. That's the way I've heard it described. Is that sort of what your how the motto goes, how the mantra goes a little bit, Greg?
It's definitely how the mantra goes. We won't bring up that I'm in the Army Reserve now, but simplified to all the former Marines.
Absolutely. Also now Vice President of Doyle Security Systems here in New York City. Just first, before we get into some of the specifics of what we're seeing today, Greg, talk to me a little bit about Doyle Security Systems. What is it exactly that you do now?
Yeah, Dan, Doyle Security Services, one of the top 20 security companies in the nation. We provide armed, unarmed guards, executive protection, intelligence services.
And as you look across the city today, certainly the NYPD, when situations like this happen, I mean, anytime there is some kind of attack somewhere, or even certain mass shootings, depending on the context here in this country, you see the NYPD say immediately they are going to step up patrols at sensitive locations. Your experience in the NYPD, a former sergeant, I'm sure that you were a part of these things as they happen because you can see this often. What does that mean for the men and women of the NYPD?
Sure, I spent many years in NYPD counterterrorism and intelligence bureau. So, what that means is, heightened patrols for those units when you're out and about the city and you see officers in tactical gear, helmet with a rifle. So, those patrols, move around randomly around the city. So the depending on the threat around the world is where those officers get positioned, and then it will then also change some of the response for the patrol officers. Extra training as far as awareness as to what's going on, and indicators to look for as they're out and about their day.
And obviously, what is it like to be a part of one of those tactical teams? I mean, these are often special units, counterterrorism units here in the city. What is it like to be as a part of that when you have to be the one who has to spot something, has to think about these things? What are you looking for, and what can you tell us about that experience?
Incredible honor to be part of that small select group, and every one of those officers take their job very seriously. It's what they train for, and hopefully they never get called on to respond. You saw last summer active shooting incident in Midtown, right?
Yeah.
And those officers, amongst others, had to respond for that. So it's that constant training and preparation. But more than that, it's the staying on top of the awareness and what's going on, right? So although what's happening in the Middle East directly affects our units and assets in that region, they can indirectly affect New York City. So those units are constantly staying on top of that information and all the threats that come from that. In
And
fact, we have officers stationed overseas so that we're getting that information, firsthand.
That's a lot of people don't know that the NYPD, I mean, such a massive department, largest in the country, and certainly has those resources that are deployed overseas that are often have that intel that is directly sent back to the people who need to know it here in the city. And Greg, and just in case anybody's just now joining us, Greg Sanfilippo, former sergeant with the New York City Police Department, experience with counterterrorism, now vice president of Doyle Security Systems. So many of us woke up to this news on Saturday morning, and you see these headlines, you're in immediate worry because it's sort of been building and boiling up. Over the last couple of weeks, they've been sending all these different ships to the area, a buildup of forces. The president has sort of indicated, I mean, hasn't really held back, doesn't really talk in cryptid language. I mean, sort of says directly, yeah, we may strike. But then it does actually happen. As someone in your position, knowing that you are directly involved in security and that this is your expertise, I wake up and I see those headlines. Maybe I think a different thing. When you wake up and you see those headlines, what are some of the things that immediately come to your mind?
When you see those headlines, the first thing that's coming to mind is that signaling, right? So in order to carry out operations on this size, if we think back to the operation in Venezuela, all the preparation that went into that, all that signaling that went into that. And there's also diplomatic efforts behind the scenes trying to, off ramp that military action, right? But so as we see that build up, from as a intel and security professional, now we're doing that pre-preparation. Okay, if this does move into a conflict, our corporations, our executives, are the security agents on the ground, are they prepared if this does end up in some sort of conflict? So you're constantly playing the what if game, and that's a great takeaway for the public. You don't need to be a Fortune 500 company or an executive to play that what if game. So if that happens, then what do we do with our security posture? And in both cases, it was clear signaling, and the military operations follow.
And now we are sort of in this moment where you talk about that what if scenario. What would your message be to New Yorkers who are worried or who are at the very least paying attention to these headlines and acknowledge that what happens in these incidents overseas often has the possibility to affect here in New York City? What is your message, would you say, to New Yorkers this morning?
The message is the most effective tool is awareness, not fear, to continue going about your day, but to take some of the tools that we use for corporate security, executive protection into your everyday lives. So when we professionally, we talk about protective intelligence and threat monitoring. For an individual, it's situational awareness and knowing before you go. What are you most likely to encounter on your way to work or in your travels? Think ahead. When we talk professionally, emergency preparedness, life safety, continuity of operations, the easy breakdown is that what if game. And what do you need to do or have? That old, your best friend is just in case. You ever heard that? Just in case, right? So
Hmm.
if just in case something happens, what should I have or what should I know? And then when we talk specialized training, it's, hey, what would you like to know to feel a little better? And when you answer that question, then put that in place, whether it be some sort of situational awareness training, active shooter training, self-defense for some, just how what makes you feel better. That's that correlation to specialized training on the security, or on the security law enforcement side.
And just sort of last couple questions because I know it's probably going to be a busy day for you today. I'm sure that there are clients of yours who are worried this morning, or who are at the very least looking to make sure that they have your services as well. Um, when you hear see something, say something. Well, what does it mean? I mean, what am I seeing where I would say something? I mean, what are the things that an officer would want to know or would want people to report if they do see something? What does that mean to you?
It's a great question, Dan. What is that something? So that's something we've been trained over the course of that saying, been around for decades, right? That it's something, some suspicious, a package somewhere on a subway, right? But no, that's no longer the case. Only the case, right? Obviously, suspicious objects, report that to law enforcement. But we're talking now about behaviors, because the what we consider that pathway to violence. When you put the news on and you hear, hey, someone just snapped, then you do the back and the investigation goes through, and people don't just snap. There are indicators along the way, So, in New York City, it's 888 NYC safe. That's to report that suspicious activity that doesn't get you to that point where you're dialing 911. So, those reports as to, someone, posting online hostile threats or just acting very, very strange and alarming. So that's what we're talking about now in that context of see something, say something. Absolutely those packages, but those behaviors also.
Greg, just sort of wrapping up here. I think back to times of Al Qaeda and ISIS, and so much of that was worrying about a terror cell. And certainly that's still a concern. But from those days, Al Qaeda certainly decades ago now, I mean, almost 25 years ago, to ISIS, which was more in the 2010 range, things have changed with social media, where someone who maybe has access to a high powered rifle can watch enough YouTube videos or Instagram videos and, in a sense, just do something based on that, angered about the way things are based on that. And that's that lone wolf scenario, I guess you could say. That's got to be something that has increased in risk over the last several years as these things have become more prevalent. Would you say that?
It definitely has. The whole threat assessment area of study, interdisciplinary teams, fancy word for just a lot of people coming together, not only security, but mental health, human resources in a workplace, school resources in an education setting, those people coming together and putting those teams together to monitor these things and figure out, where that person along that pathway before they snap, that proverbial they just snapped, where we can get them some resources
Yeah.
and help, where we can intervene. So it's a major area right now, focus of security, where it's not just the guards, the guns, or the gates, right? How do we, find those indicators, those signals to find someone help and keep people safe.
Greg Sanfilippo, former NYPD sergeant, now the president of Doyle Security Systems here in New York City. Just quickly, how can people get in touch with you if they want to? What's the best way to contact the company, or is that something that you guys put out there?
Yes, Dan, it can find us online. It's doylesecurityservices.com, DOYLE, securityservices.com.
All right, Greg, thank you very much. We appreciate the time.